to say sorry. She's on all of our minds right now. So, sometimes Molly says I'm not sensitive enough, that I'm upset, you can see. But in situations like this, I try to think about the good things. And it's not how we all benefited from Caroline. That'd be a selfish way to look at it. But I think about her. And I don't know if you ever had the chance to talk to her. But she cannot wait to see Jesus. I'm sure she shared that with you multiple times. So I wanted to share just something that I wrote to Marcia to share with Caroline. Maybe help us picture the positive, picture what is about to happen. I said, my grief is comforted with the thought of you seeing Jesus. Your spirit always came alive, and your smile always got a little bigger when you would talk about seeing Jesus, and you are almost there. And picture this scene. Give him the biggest hug you have ever given, and do what you've been wanting to do for the longest time, talk his ear off. So let's remember that. Let's remember not what we're losing, not what we're going to miss, but let's remember what she's about to experience. We're going to talk about faith today. That's what the series we're starting is in Hebrews chapter 11, the Faith Hall of Fame. And Caroline is, unless the Lord spares her today, Caroline is going to realize the result of faith. And it's beautiful. Picture that scene. Caroline's not a fast runner, but I guarantee she's going to be sprinting into the arms of Jesus. And you all know how she loved to hug. That hug's not going to compare to any hug she's ever given you. I can see it. I know it. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm happy for her. So like I mentioned, we're going to be speaking or looking in Hebrews chapter 11, the Faith Hall of Fame, if you want to look at it that way. A listing of some amazing people in the Bible who had faith and what that faith led them to do. So this, it's easy to say it's people from the Bible, and that's true. But I wanted to rephrase that, and I wrote down people from history who lived faithful lives. Because to me, the Bible's a history book. Okay, it's just as factual, it's just as valid, it's just as important as any history book you might pick up and read, any history book you might read in school, or any history book, American history, Greek history, what you name it, world history. This is another book in those books of the history of the world, the history of mankind. It has a lot more impact. I'm not trying to minimize it at all to say it's the same level of importance or significance. It's the most significant history book. But let's look at these as people from history, just like George Washington, just like Napoleon, just like Julius Caesar, all of those people from history that you might be able to read about and learn about. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to read about or learn today about one person, but we're starting this series of learning about significant people in history and how their lives were led by faith. These are not examples of people who just had strong beliefs. These are not people who just had a personal faith. If you've heard maybe people say things that way, that my personal belief is, my personal faith is. These aren't people that just had a feeling in their heart, had just a belief system. These are people who their faith influenced their actions. It wasn't just a thought process. It wasn't just something in their heart that they trusted in, that they believed in. You do not need to wonder or question what these people believed, because they showed it by what they did. They showed it. It wasn't just something that you had to ask them about. So, hey, who do you believe in? You could see by their actions who they believed in and who influenced their decisions. It's not just something that they held in their back pocket. It wasn't something just in their heart that they would lean on when life got difficult. Oftentimes, we look to our faith when things are tough, when we can't make sense of things, and we'll just have faith. You'll get through it. You'll get through it if your faith influences your actions. That's how you get through it. It's not just this good feeling that having faith gives us. It needs to be that faith needs to influence our decisions and our actions. And the people we're going to talk about here are people whose decisions were based on their faith. Have you ever made a decision in your life that went against all sound reason, all sound logic? It went against any rational thought that you might have, because it was simply based on what your faith is telling you to do. Some of us could probably say yes. I could point back to certain instances in my life where sure, my faith motivated me and helped me make decisions that maybe I didn't want to make, or make me do things I didn't want to do. So in some instances, I'm not going to assume that for any of you. You can think back on your own life. So in some instances, we could probably say yes. I could say the most major decisions in my life may not have been 100% influenced by faith. My career, it's not that my career is counter to my faith, but I can't say that based on my faith and based on what I read in God's Word and what it's telling me to do, that made me decide the career path I want to go on. Not that my career path or your career path is wrong, but can you say that you chose to do whatever you're doing purely 100% based on faith? So maybe where to live. I can't say every place we've moved. Maybe once it was influenced by faith, but there were other factors that went into deciding to move, deciding to go to a certain area, deciding to live in a certain community. I can't say it was 100% based on my faith and what God was telling me to do. Who to marry. Not that I married somebody that is not faithful, not that I married somebody that's wrong, but I can't say looking back that 100% it was because of my faith that I married Molly. That was a part of it, because she's a Christian woman. I wanted a Christian household, so that's in there. But in comparing to somebody who built an ark in a desert, I can't say that those big decisions in my life were on the scale of that. A desert that hasn't seen water, maybe ever, God's told Noah, build a boat. At the mocking of everybody around him, There's no sound, rational judgment that Noah could come to decide, yeah, this is a fantastic idea. It's because God told him to do it. And he was a faithful man, and he did it in the face of countless obstacles. What about sacrificing your son? And not just a son, but the son who God said he would make you into a great nation through that son. And making the decision to sacrifice him. How? That not only is that illogical, but that goes against what God told Abraham he was going to do. You're going to make me into a great nation through my son Isaac, and now you want me to take him up and sacrifice him. So not only, again, does that defy human logic and reasoning, on the surface that goes against what God had already told him would happen. But God said it, and he did it. What about entering an ocean that miraculously had been cleared and walking in? And so we read that story of the Red Sea, and it's a neat story. Kids can draw pictures of it, and it's kind of a neat scene. But think about standing on the shore, even though the waves have been parted, the ocean has been parted, and you've got walls of water all around you, and God says, walk. Walk on dry land, but walk with walls of water around you. I remember when we were kayaking, the one time in my life I thought I was going to die. We were kayaking in the ocean. It was pretty calm, and all of a sudden this set of waves came up out of nowhere, and it pushed our kayak up onto the rocks, and the back of it got stuck on the rocks, and the waves went out, and of course the kayak stayed, tipped me and my niece, and I remember going into the water so quickly I didn't know what happened, but all of a sudden I find myself underwater, and I come up, and all I see around me is water. As high as it could see, all I can see around me, and another wave hits me and puts me under, and I come up, and all I see is water. But that's just, I mean, those waves may have been this big, but it's just me, because I have water issues. I don't like water. So I might be exaggerating the story. Molly could tell you, she was there. But maybe those waves were this tall. Maybe they were 6 foot tall. I don't know. But I guarantee it wasn't an ocean that had just been cut in half. And God said, walk. I'll hold the waves back. Just walk. We're going to talk about all of these things. And Moses choosing a life of mistreatment, choosing a life of abuse, instead of a life of living as a prince, living as royalty. Moses chose that because of his faith. So I'm not minimizing anybody's faith. I'm minimizing mine. I'm not going to put any words in your mouth or put any thoughts in your head. You can judge yourself. But I can't say I've had faith anywhere close to the level of the people that we're going to talk about. So it might be easy to say, yeah, but God spoke to those people. God spoke to Abraham. God actually verbally communicated with them, and they had a conversation even. So it might be easy to say that. But what if God came to you, Steve, and said, Steve, I'm going to make you into a great nation through your son. You're going to be great. If you could count the sand on the shore, you could count your descendants. And then a while later he said, Steve, go take your son up and sacrifice him. So God spoke to some of these people, but that doesn't mean they didn't have faith. Jonathan, go build a boat. In the middle of the Mojave Desert, Jonathan, go build a boat. If we didn't have the story, we may not take it as seriously. So it's easy to look back, and maybe it's just me, but it's easy to look back and say, well, surely if God spoke to me, I would do it. Oh yeah, count me in, God. I guarantee, if you just talk to me, I will do it. Maybe, but he's speaking to you now. And don't you think it still took faith for these people to do what they did? And I'm going to state it again, against all reason, against all rational thought, against what everyone around them were saying to them, against what they actually personally wanted to do, they still acted on faith. And that's the key part, is they acted. Moses didn't say, yeah, that's a good idea, and then go about his business. Yeah, that would probably be fun, God, or sure, that's neat. And then he went about his life and went back to his job and made phone calls and went back to his family and had dinner. He took action. He did something. They did not just believe, but they turned their belief into action. Turn to James chapter 2. And we'll read verses 14 through 24. And I think this is a great description of exactly what I'm talking about. James chapter 2, verse 14. What good is it, my brothers, if a man claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save him? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to him, go, I wish you well, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about his physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. But someone will say, I have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by what I do. You believe that there is one God, good. Even the demons believe that and shudder. That's dead faith. The demons believe God, sure, but what do? In the same way, was not even Rahab the prostitute considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off in a different direction? As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. So as we go through this study in Hebrews 11, think about the actions that the people took. Not the feel good about faith, and maybe I just did. I'm contradicting myself. I don't want to minimize that, because it is valuable, that personal, that peace that we have knowing the outcome of our faith. That peace we have knowing the outcome of Caroline's faith. That comfort that comes is valuable, and it's not something that I want to demean or minimize. But when we look at this, for us to have, I think, get the most out of it and the most understanding, look at the actions that these people took. How did their faith mold their decision? How did they struggle with what God was asking them to do? Again, going back to, well, if God just told you to do it, well, do it. How hard is that? He told you to do it. But some of these people struggled with the decision. They struggled with, is this really what God wants me to do? Is this really what I should be doing? And how did they struggle once they started doing what God asked them to do? Not just struggle with starting the action, not just the struggle with deciding to build the boat, but the struggle in building the boat. Focus on that. Think about that. And most importantly, consider the outcome. What was accomplished and what impact did it have on the world at the time, and what impact is it still having today? We're going to talk about Abel, and later in the New Testament, looking back to Genesis 4, God says Abel's blood still cries out today. Why is that? We're going to talk about Abel in just a second. But think about the impact on the world at that time, and also the impact it is still having today. You know, we were talking with the girls the other day, and they were asking about Afghanistan and everything going on, and why is this happening? And I said, well, you know what, Lucy? The people that are fighting, they both believe in the same God. And Lucy's, no way. There's no way that they believe in the same God that we do. And I said, well, they do. They just believe the promise was through a different person than we believe the promise came through. So that is the root of the conflict, the root of the problem between Christians, Jews, Muslims, Islam, is that who did the promise come through? We know and we believe it came through Isaac. Muslims believe, probably to the same extent we do, maybe even more, that it came through Ishmael. So that's the root of the problem between the two. That's still having an impact today. That's still causing irreparable harm and damage to the world today. So in these examples, though, let's focus on the good things, the positive impact that is still having, that these events, that these actions are still having on the world today. Turn to Hebrews 13, and we'll read verses 7 and 8. It says, "Remember your leaders who spoke the word of God to you. Consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever." So that may or may not be pointing to the people that we're talking about when it says, "Remember your leaders," but I wanted to focus on the sentence that says, "Consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith." Jesus Christ is the same today, or is the same yesterday and today and forever. They were serving the same person we're serving today. The same person that spoke to them is still speaking to us today. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. So that's a little intro into what we're going to start studying. But I also wanted to cover a little bit about Abel. So Cain and Abel were the firstborn kids. Well, not firstborn. Cain was the firstborn. And that's kind of interesting. I don't know if it's just me being ignorant or if this is new to you too, but it was new to me when I started looking at this, that when we read this story, it's kind of amazing that as far as the Bible records at least, Cain is the first human being born to a woman. So there's Adam and Eve created by God, and now Cain is the firstborn to Adam and Eve, so he is the first one that came to being through man and woman. And he was evil. That could probably be a whole study in itself that I'm not diving into, but just a thought that kind of hit me as I was going through this is the firstborn person to man and woman was evil. Abel was the secondborn. They were brothers. So God perfectly created Adam and Eve, and the first human created by man was evil. So let's read the story. Some of you may know it, maybe at least know the highlights, but let's read it, and then I'm not going to go into a lot about Cain because the point of this study is people with faith, and Cain was not. We're going to focus more on Abel, but let's read the story just so we have the proper context and understanding. I'm not going to read the whole story because the second part really goes into the punishment for Cain, but I'm going to read what's regarding Cain and Abel. Genesis 4, Adam lay with his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, "With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man." Later she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. But Abel brought fat portions and some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you hungry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it." Now Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let's go out to the field." And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" "I don't know," he replied. "Am I my brother's keeper?" So that's Cain. And we're not, like I said, the point of this isn't to talk about lack of faith. The point is to talk about faith. So what was different about the offerings? That was the core of the issue here, of the difference between Cain and Abel, was the offerings that they brought. And it's kind of interesting, you think about this, the offering that Abel brought was before any commandments had been given to the Israelites. The Israelites didn't even exist at this point. There wasn't the word, what we refer to as the Old Testament, to look back on, to know what offerings pleased God. Abel just kind of came up with it. Maybe he had seen his parents do something. We don't know. Maybe God had talked to him. We don't know all that. But as far as the recording that we have, Abel was given zero instructions about bringing an offering. Should offerings be brought at all? Is that what pleases God? And when you bring offerings, what should you bring? So it's kind of interesting to think about that. We look at it with the knowledge of the sacrifices that were commanded to be given, but those commandments were generations after the events that we're looking at. So, from what we can tell, without any instruction, without any knowledge, without any understanding, they both brought offerings. So what was the difference in the offerings? Abel's was the best portions. He brought the best of the toils of his work, the best of his harvest. He brought the best to God. He brought the fat portions. You know, a ribeye steak tastes a whole lot better than a skirt steak, right? That's the fat portions. That's the tasty part. That's the good part that we like to eat. That's what Abel brought to God. And he also brought the first fruits. And again, if we think forward to all the commandments that were given, that's what God told them to give later on as a model of what Abel did. And that's the way, again, how Abel's faith and his actions are still speaking to us today. And was speaking to the Israelites as well. So Abel brought the first, the best of the harvest. So imagine, we go to the supermarket and we buy food and we cook it, right? We're not really involved in the food making process as far as growing it, as far as raising it. So, it's easy for us to read, just bring the best, but these are people who toiled every day and struggled and had to raise animals for food, had to raise crops for food. And after all that work, Abel said, you know what? God deserves the best. Even though I'm the one that put all the work in, God deserves the best. God deserves the first of the harvest. I'm going to take that to him. That shows the heart of Abel. From what we can tell, Cain just kind of brought the leftovers. Kind of like after he was done eating what we might throw to the dogs, that's what Cain brought. And said, oh yeah, here, how about that? It was Abel's, and what's interesting is it was Abel's action that God considered righteous. God didn't say Abel was righteous just because he was born of Adam and Eve. God said he was righteous because of his actions. Again, what he did, not just his belief. Abel was putting consideration of God ahead of consideration of himself, and Cain was only serving himself and thinking of God second. Ultimately, this is the test of faith, putting yourself and your desires and wants second to God's desires and wants, even if it costs you your life. So do you not think, I have a brother. A lot of you have brothers. You grew up together. You know a little bit about your brother, and from what we don't know their Cain and Abel's ages, but they're adults, I would say. Do you not think Abel knew his brother? Do you not think Abel knew maybe what Cain would do if Abel kept bringing these first fruits and was looking so much better in front of God than Cain? We don't know, but I have a pretty good idea that Abel knew his brother and knew what could happen by him living this way and him doing the things that he was doing. But he still put God first. Abel's example still speaks to us today because, again, is the foundation of faith, bringing God the first fruits. So how can we do that in our life? So I want to conclude by asking you to think about what's your harvest. I think about Caroline, and her harvest wasn't money. She was getting by fine, but her harvest that she could bring as first fruits to God wasn't anything monetary. She gave, so I'm not minimizing anything that she did financially, but she wasn't a rich woman that donated millions to charities. But her first fruits were her spirit. Her first fruits were her service to others. And if anybody had a need, if anybody had a problem, anybody had a struggle, she may not be able to solve it, but she sure was willing to try. She was willing to help. And that was, her first fruits, right? That was the fruits that God gave her, the harvest that God gave her. That's what she used. So I want you to think about, what's your harvest? Or what's your toil that you're putting your God-given talents into to produce something? And in our society, we often think of money, and I don't want you to think monetarily when you think about this. But what are the first fruits that you harvest that you can bring to God? What is written in God's Word that speaks to you about how to use your harvest? What can we see in the Word? Again, it would be maybe easier if God just said, hey, Doug, go do this. Verbally, maybe even a burning bush like Moses had, something physical, right, to say, okay, yep, all right, I know my path now. But remember, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. He's still speaking. So what are you seeing in what he's saying and what he's telling you to do, and what is your harvest, and what are the first fruits that you can bring? So we're going to sing a song. If you would like to make any